Top 3 most terrible anti-homeless shelter laws across the world. Homelessness remains a critical issue that governments and organizations grapple with. But instead of addressing the root causes like affordable housing, mental health support, and job opportunities, some regions have adopted laws that criminalize the efforts to help those in need. This video will cover the top 3 most terrible anti-homeless shelter laws that are hindering progress and making life even harder for the homeless community. You might be shocked at how some places are choosing to deal with this crisis. Make sure to stick around till the end, and if you're passionate about justice and human rights, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more informative content. 1. Fort Lauderdale's ban on feeding the homeless. The law's origin and intentions. Fort Lauderdale, Florida, made headlines in 2014 when the city council passed a series of ordinances, including one that effectively banned feeding the homeless in public places. The law, titled the Urban Camping Ordinance, was supposedly designed to address sanitation concerns and the safety of public spaces. It made it illegal for individuals and organizations to provide food to the homeless in parks or other public areas without adhering to strict guidelines, which are nearly impossible to meet for most charitable organizations. The real impact on charities and volunteers. This law caused an uproar when a 90-year-old man named Arnold Abbott was arrested for distributing food to the homeless, something he had done for over 2 decades. Abbott's case brought international attention to the severity of the issue, showing how compassion was being criminalized. Local charities and church groups were disheartened, as they were now required to have permits in specific facilities, making it incredibly difficult to carry on their charitable work. While proponents of the law argue that it is meant to prevent the homeless from congregating and causing disturbances in public areas, opponents say that it exacerbates the homeless crisis by denying people access to basic survival needs like food. A humanitarian crisis. Under the radar, the fallout from this law has been brutal for the homeless population in Fort Lauderdale. With fewer organizations able to legally provide food, many homeless individuals are left hungry and desperate. The city has yet to offer adequate alternatives, like more shelters or food programs, forcing its most vulnerable residents to fend for themselves in an increasingly hostile environment. This law is one of the clearest examples of how the criminalization of homelessness worsens the problem instead of offering real solutions. 2. Houston's ban on homeless encampments. How the law came into being. In 2017, Houston passed a law that made it illegal for homeless people to set up tents or encampments in public spaces. The law, which came as a response to complaints from residents and businesses, was said to address issues of safety and sanitation. On the surface, it seemed like a measure designed to keep public spaces clean and usable for everyone. However, the effects of this law have been devastating for the homeless community. The displacement of the homeless. For many homeless individuals, encampments serve as temporary communities where they can find safety in numbers. Tearing down these encampments often leaves people without a safe place to sleep, pushing them further into isolation and danger. Critics of the Houston law argue that it criminalizes poverty rather than addressing its root causes. When law enforcement destroys these encampments, it often leaves people with nowhere to go. Many shelters in Houston are either full, unsafe, or inaccessible to people with mental health issues or addictions. The legal consequences for the homeless. Under this law, individuals caught camping in public spaces are often fined or arrested, pushing them further into poverty and making it harder for them to find a way out of homelessness. The financial penalties associated with breaking this law can add up quickly, creating a vicious cycle for those who are already struggling. Many who are fined or jailed end up missing job interviews, losing their limited possessions, or suffering deteriorating mental health due to the stress of constantly being uprooted. What's being done to change it? Activists and advocacy groups are fighting back against this law, arguing that criminalizing homelessness does nothing to address the systemic issues that cause it. Instead, they're pushing for more humane solutions, like increased funding for affordable housing, mental health services, and addiction treatment programs. While the city has made some progress with initiatives like Housing First, the law against encampments remains in place, leaving many homeless individuals vulnerable and without options. 3. Las Vegas's sidewalk camping ban. How Las Vegas targets the homeless. In 2019, Las Vegas passed a controversial law that made it illegal for homeless individuals to sleep on sidewalks in certain areas if shelter beds were available. The law, known as the sidewalk camping ban, was met with fierce opposition from advocates for the homeless, who argued that it criminalized homelessness rather than addressing the lack of affordable housing and shelter options. The law's timing was especially controversial, as it came on the heels of a significant increase in homelessness in the city. Las Vegas has one of the highest rates of homelessness in the country, and many argue that the city has not done enough to provide adequate shelter or services for its homeless population. The consequences for violators under the sidewalk. Camping ban, individuals caught sleeping on sidewalks in designated areas could be fined up to $1,000 or face 6 months in jail. The law applies to both individuals and groups, and it gives law enforcement significant discretion in deciding when and where to enforce it. Critics argue that this has led to a disproportionate targeting of people of color and other marginalized groups. Shelter availability versus reality. One of the key provisions of the law is that it only applies when shelter beds are available, but this raises significant questions about what available really means. Many shelters have strict rules regarding sobriety, behavior, and curfews, which can make them inaccessible for people dealing with mental health issues or substance abuse problems. Additionally, shelters often reach capacity, leaving many people with nowhere to go, even when the city claims that beds are available. Public backlash and legal challenges. The backlash against the sidewalk camping ban has been fierce. Protesters flooded city council meetings, and several lawsuits have been filed challenging the law's constitutionality. Many argue that it violates the Eighth Amendment's protection against cruel and unusual punishment, as it punishes people simply for being homeless. While the city has made some efforts to increase shelter capacity and provide services for the homeless, critics argue that these efforts fall far short of what's needed. Why criminalizing homelessness isn't the answer. The three laws we've discussed, Fort Lauderdale's ban on feeding the homeless, Houston's ban on homeless encampments, and Las Vegas's sidewalk camping ban, are just a few examples of a broader trend in the US and around the world. Rather than addressing the systemic issues that lead to homelessness, such as a lack of affordable housing, mental health services, and employment opportunities, these laws criminalize people for trying to survive. The human cost of these laws is staggering. When homeless individuals are fined, jailed, or forced to move from one place to another, they are pushed further into the margins of society. These laws create a cycle of poverty and desperation that is incredibly difficult to break. Solutions that could make a difference. There are better ways to address homelessness. Advocates argue for a housing-first approach, which focuses on providing stable, permanent housing for homeless individuals without preconditions. Studies have shown that once people have a safe place to live, they're more likely to find employment, access mental health services, and stay off the streets. In addition to affordable housing, cities should invest in mental health services, addiction treatment, and job training programs. Rather than spending millions of dollars on law enforcement to crack down on the homeless, cities could use those funds to create programs that actually help people get back on their feet. The laws we've discussed today are just a few examples of how cities are choosing to criminalize homelessness rather than addressing its root causes. As long as these laws remain in place, the homeless community will continue to suffer, and the cycle of poverty will continue. If you believe in making a difference, consider supporting organizations that fight for the rights of the homeless and push for more humane solutions. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more important content like this. Together, we can advocate for change and a more compassionate society.